Just let me know when we have quorum and then I can start.
Yeah, I think we have quorum.
Thanks, Isabel. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the regular monthly meeting of the Finance and Revenue Committee of the Universal Health Plan Governance Board. I am Cheryl Ramirez, the chair, and we'd like to start with roll call.
Yes. Cheryl Ramirez.
Here.
Chenwei Chi doesn't look like he's here today. Mary Lou Henrich.
Here.
Richard Gibson.
Here.
Jeff Goodman.
Here.
John Santa.
Here.
Bethany Stairs. Don't see Bethany yet. And Charlie Swanson.
Here.
Thank you.
Thanks, Isabel. I wanted to say, and some of you may know this already, that the Universal Health Plan Board voted against extending the Finance and Revenue Committee past March, along with the other couple of committees besides communications. So March 17th will be our last meeting, but rest assured, Charlie and Richard will ensure continuity of the work that we've done in the Finance and Revenue Committee as they join the Transition Committee to pick up where the Finance and Revenue Committee leaves off. So thank you both for agreeing to join the Transition Committee. Let's see, we'll review the agenda. So Mimi will go through the board and committee updates. Echo Northwest will just show us an outline of the report and talk about how we would provide comments, feedback, revisions to the report, how they'd like to do that. We're going to go through the revised revenue target, the reserve and startup revenue strategy, the revenue proposal revisions, particularly related to the two topics that we briefly brought up last time, and I think Charlie is going to go through them in more detail. And then we'll go through a basic revenue proposal. There should be at least 2, maybe 3 votes today. So we do have people who would like to provide public comment before we vote. So we're going to have 3 public comments right now. And then we have 1 other public comment, a general comment that we'll leave for the end of the meeting. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Isabel to do those public comments.
Yes, so just to reiterate, this is a time particularly for people to share public comment related to voting items on today's agenda. If you signed up for this slot and meant to sign up for a general slot, that's absolutely fine. We can have you go at a different time. But today we have 3 people signed up. The first person is Barbara Schneider. You will have about 2 minutes to speak. We're having some technical difficulties today, so our timer isn't displaying properly, but I will give you a 30-second warning in the chat when that time is getting close to winding down. But Barbara, I'll invite you to begin sharing your comment now. Thank you.
Thank you, Isabel. I really appreciate it. So my name is Barbara Snyder. I live in Bandon, Oregon. I relocated from Arizona to here 6 years ago. And I just want to let you know that part of my career, I led forecasting for the financing of social liabilities funded by SAMHSA under CMS and also by the Annie Casey Foundation. I worked with actuaries and councils of government and won awards for collaboration by the American Institutes for Research. I'm only saying that so you understand I understand financing and forecasting. Additionally, I was an evaluator for block grants to states. When Georgetown University was a technical assistance hub for children's mental health, I evaluated block grants and we actually selected block grants to be funded to states. So what I wanted to talk with you about is that I did write a comment about my personal situation, but what I wanted to, which is in your written packet, but I did want to talk to you about the cost assumptions that are, to me, by the way, I heard some great comments last week, and I appreciate the thoughtfulness and work that many of you are doing. Obviously, you're thinking about this in a real clear-eyed way, but the cost assumptions are based on cost control. I'm really confused by that. They're based on a lack of care almost. They're based on the fact we don't have enough physicians. There's not enough primary care. I live in a healthcare desert where there's literally no care. Many counties in Oregon are healthcare deserts. Oregon has not done a cancer control plan since 2005. So cancer is the #1 cause of death in Oregon and in our county especially. So the fact that I formed a task force for our county, that's a pathway to care problem. Not enough physicians, too long wait times. People are dying of stage 3 and 4 cancer because they can't get care. So given that, I wanted to say the forecasting is completely done on past costs, which is not an adequate system of healthcare, in my opinion. I really looked through all the materials I could find. I don't see a system of healthcare. So there is no universal healthcare unless there's a system of care that's providing healthcare. I'm a nurse. The comments I heard about not needing physicians because nurse practitioners and PAs are adequate is false. It's absolutely false. Other countries who have done that have pulled back because they have worse outcomes. So that is not a good thing. The fact that our state is ranked 45th, 45th out of 50 states for doctors to work in. We have institutional structural problems around providing healthcare. So the financing committee is simply financing a cost control structure based on past costs. So I wanted to say that I couldn't see a system of healthcare that you want to fund. And if you're not going to fund actual healthcare, that means people have to get their healthcare somewhere else. I feel like people in Oregon are not clear about the fact they're not getting great healthcare. In our county, they believe that if you can't get cancer, you die from it. So that's their belief. That's their belief in 5 focus groups that we did last year.
Excuse me, Barbara,
yes.
we're at time. Could you?
Okay. So wrapping it up, I feel like I'd like to see you look at financing a system of healthcare instead of financing a cost containment plan for past costs that do not provide adequate healthcare to anybody.
Thank you, Barbara.
Thank you.
Thank you. And next we will have Lou Sininger share your comments, and tech should be working for you now.
Can I just save my comments till last?
Sure.
Thank
I'll make a note of that. And then next up we have Tom Sinsick. Oh, it doesn't look like Tom is here yet, so we will reserve his comments for later as well.
Thanks, Isabel. So no more public comments related to votes then? Okay. So I'm going to hand it over to Director McDonald. Oh, John, go ahead. You're on mute.
John, you're on mute.
I just want to make sure that the committee members read the largest comment in this morning's meeting. I'm surprised that no one from that group is, making a comment. Perhaps they weren't aware that they would be able to do so before we vote. But I think that comment expressed very significant concerns about the direction we're going in. I think it was signed by 7-8 pages of folks. I just hope, colleagues, that each of you had the time to look at that and factor that into the discussion today. Thank you.
Thanks, John. Go ahead, Mimi.
All right, thank you, John. So good morning, everyone. I'm Dr. Mimi McDonald, Executive Director of the Universal Health Plan Governance Board, providing an update on what the board is up to and also some of the committee work. So our governance board met two weeks ago, and as Chair Ramirez mentioned, went over sort of the board and committee timeline. So in addition to the Finance and Revenue Committee, wrapping up what they are able to complete during the month of March, the Plan Design and Expenditure and Operations Committees will also be wrapping up their work. Again, we still hope very much that committee members will continue to be engaged in the process as things move along and more work gets done through the Transition Committee. Next up, the board reviewed the Milliman expenditure estimates. Dr. Chun-Wei Chi gave a terrific talk about international universal health plan efforts. There was a proposal regarding subrogation, which was approved by the board, also enrollment preliminary proposal and behavioral health payment proposal. So that was what happened at the last board meeting. And then coming up in March at the board, a couple of things for people to be aware of. OHA is going to do a presentation on their readiness report. So that was part of the original legislation called upon OHA to provide some input into this universal health plan. So Jessica Marino will be presenting that at the next board meeting. John McConnell, who's a health economist and director of the Center for Health Systems Effectiveness at OHSU, will also be speaking for about half an hour in addition to sort of the regular board work that happens. So I hope people have the opportunity to join in. That'll be March 19th. Next up, Operations Committee just met last week. Policy Advisor Lee Hastings gave a terrific presentation about the federal health system and potential alignment areas. So if you think about things like the VA healthcare system, TRICARE, Indian Health Services, and other related federal agencies that provide either healthcare directly or provide coverage for healthcare. There was also gave an example to talk about the Washington state, the Washington Healthcare Management and Coordination System, which is Washington's effort to coordinate the electronic health records for not only for their Medicaid members, but also involving Department of Corrections and DSHS in Washington. And so that's ongoing. And so kind of not because that was specifically a proposal or a recommendation that the UHP do something similar, but more an example of how a large transformation can occur. Plan design and expenditure is actually coming up in 2 days, but at their last meeting went over prescription drug systems, cost containment, and enrollment proposal. At this upcoming meeting, there'll be more on cost containment and also preliminary proposal review of all the proposals that have come that Plan Design and Expenditure have created with time to get feedback on what kind of the prioritization that the Plan Design and Expenditure Committee feels should happen with some of the outstanding elements of those proposals. Community engagement and communications is starting back up in March, which will be great. In the month of March also will be the strategic engagement meetings. We're hard at work, gotten invitations out to those, and people are responding. I think that that information is going to be brought back to the board with in a detailed process. And as also as mentioned previously, the Community Engagement and Communications Committee have changed their meeting time and a little bit of their format. So they will start their meetings at 4 p.m. And go until 6:30 to enable people who have a hard time getting within to meetings within that 9 to 5 time construct. And last, I apologize because it was not on this slide, but we cannot forget the Transition Committee. The very first meeting of the Transition Committee will be on March 19th. It will be an in-person meeting for those who can make it, hybrid for those who can't. And that will be the initial kickoff meeting. So we're really excited about that. Any questions or any additions from any of our board members?
Not for me.
Great.
Thank you
Okey-doke.
for that
Thank you.
comprehensive update.
All right, I am going to turn this over to my colleagues Echo Northwest. Just give me 1 second so I can make sure you can share. Um, all participants. Okay, I think it's good. I'm going to stop my share and we're going to turn it over to you.
Great. So we'll keep this part short. So I think as we talked last meeting or the week before, Echo is producing a report with part of our requirement as part of our contract. I would say technically it's our report, but it's an odd thing. It's more our report of the documentation of your process and findings and other considerations. And so I think talking to Chair Ramirez and Mimi, that we think it's important that you guys have your fingerprints on that. And so what I really want to talk about today is a little bit about that process going forward. So I think I would say first thing, it's about 80–90% written already. We've been kind of writing in the background all along as the process has evolved and kind of mapped to your discussion and considerations in that discussion. And so I think there are kind of two things we want to queue up for review. The first thing here is we want to send a draft out after this meeting for you to see, and then to use that as a vehicle for any discussion with respect to, we'll call it structure and not content. The structure being like, are we having the right kind of section headings and elements about how you want to think it's important to communicate both to the board and to the public on the work that you've done. And so what I have here is just a short, sort of not short, but a little more detailed table of contents than I normally would show in a report. But you can just see how we're kind of talking about it, how we're talking about the revenue proposal framework, how we're thinking about the cost pieces, the impact, and then one of our key pieces, making sure we talk about impact to households and businesses. And then the considerations relating to funded transition costs and reserve capitalization. So I think you can kind of see kind of how we're kind of covering those topics. They don't one-for-one match everything in your charge. This is kind of the odd part of the contract. And so we want to make sure that in the end, like we really want to make sure we serve your communications and the public's sort of knowledge on the ground you covered. So I'm going to send that out, and the thing will be for you to review it. And let's just talk about at the next meeting, big kind of structural things that you want to see kind of in there, or and any other comments you might have. Then once we kind of move through that, finalize the conversation after the next meeting, we will send a full report to you to do basically line items, track changes, and comments. And so think of that as basically a Word document. You do work within sort of to track your comments so we can compile everybody's feedback that has it, both in terms of comments and sort of word choice. We'll consolidate that and work with Chair Ramirez to sort of mediate any sort of, comments that we think need to sort of be addressed that, just, oh, like, this is kind of outside of scope, inside of scope. But basically we're trying to provide enough sort of flexibility to sort of, I would say, one, document the things you agreed on, and two, make sure that we have kind of, call it like a set of issues that are related to those conversations that you've had. And so that's how we're trying to organize your feedback. So that's a little bit about just the process today. I can take some questions, but hopefully it's clear about how we're trying to sort of make sure that you have that process, and then ultimately try to have that report finalized in that sort of mid-April timeframe. Chair Ramirez.
Hey, Morgan, I do have a couple questions just to make sure I'm clear. So first, you would like us to provide feedback on the structure of the report. And when are those comments due as
Yeah,
opposed
we'll
to
have that as an agenda item, I think, at the next meeting.
on the 17th?
Yeah, I would say if there are simply just like written comments, that I think folks can send that along, but I think we also want to just say like, hey, I have some things I want to talk about with the structure of it. But I think that was kind of the plan.
Okay, so in terms of the track changes on the content,
Yeah.
when would those be due then?
Yeah, so we would, after our next meeting, we would finalize a draft that is sort of consistent with everything. So we rewrote, the last time we've touched this is end of 2025. And then we would update it basically for all the conversations we've had. And then I think we would give people about 2 weeks to provide, written
2 weeks
comments.
from the 17th, so
Yeah.
like the end of March. Okay.
Yeah, basically around end of March. That would give us a little bit of time to kind of finalize, and then we would kind of have that final draft.
Okay, thanks, Morgan. Looks like Jeff has his hand up.
Good. Yes, thank you. When do you anticipate getting this draft to us?
For the first discussion,
Yes,
yeah, this week.
this week.
Yeah.
And could you, I'm not clear on the process. Will we have a chance after all the edits and suggestions and comments and adjustments are done and the final draft is sent out? Will that be available to us before our last meeting in 2 weeks?
No, so the process would be look at the report as today, give us guidance on sort of like, hey, we really need a chapter on X, or or some very, think of it less line edits, but just big picture structure pieces. Then after the meeting, we would finalize it based on the discussion. It would go out for comments. And those would come back to us. We would consolidate that. My sense is we probably need one last look from everybody so they can see everybody's review of sort of what's in there to kind of say, hey, anything that anybody else wants to add or address, and we would then work those out with Chair Ramirez. So think of it as, yes, you would get basically 2 bites at that apple post their next meeting to look at the content and feel comfortable what's in there.
Will we as a committee have the opportunity to vote on the final version?
I'll defer to Chair Ramirez on that question.
Doesn't look like it because our last meeting is the 17th, but you will be able to send in any revisions, then it will be finalized. That's how I see it, unless Director McDonald has another idea on that.
No,
My comment on that is that it's supposed to be a report coming from this committee. We should vote on the final version before it is submitted to the governance committee.
So if, pardon me, Jeff, if I may interject, this is a report that actually is created by Echo Northwest. So it is the Echo Northwest report of their work. So that's
Same
what's being
comment
submitted.
applies. If it's a report coming to Eco Northwest based on finance and revenue, we are the Finance and Revenue Committee. We should say, yes, we approve this report prepared by Echo Northwest to go to the governance board. I mean, I appreciate all the work that Echo Northwest and Milliman have done, but the final report should say Finance and Revenue agrees.
Maybe John and Charlie have thoughts.
Charlie has the same.
Yeah, well, I want to strongly second Jeff's concerns. I mean, we heard a few minutes ago that the board says we're done. We're done on the 17th. I'm done on the 17th. And I'm very uncomfortable that somebody thinks that I'm going to be held accountable for something happening after the 17th. And with all due respect to the executive director, I think Morgan just described more accurately what the report is about. It's Eco Northwest reporting on our activity. It's not Eco Northwest's activity. So, this is just very troubling to start this meeting out this way. You can't have it both ways. You can't be asking a committee that essentially the board has ended to be accountable for activities that happen after we are done. And in this case, Morgan, as always, I think your structure is just fine. You know, it is the content that I'm going to object to, and those objections are going to be substantive. And until the 17th, I'm going to make substantive suggestions. But don't. I don't want my name attributed to the approval of a report that I never got to vote on.
May I interject? Morgan, you said that's like 90% done. Would it be possible for committee members to provide feedback both on the structure and the content by the 17th instead of after the 17th? Is that at all possible to so that we can vote? We can vote on the content as it stands on the 17th. I realize you'll still have to do some tweaks, revisions, address maybe conflicting suggestions, things like that. But I wonder if we could get to a compromise here where they can actually look at the content and give you revisions before then.
Certainly, it was mostly just about an efficiency perspective. So,
Okay. Yeah.
But Cheryl, can I just ask, what's going on here? I mean, you know, earlier you described there's a very capable group of people who are moving on to the transition committee.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the board has signaled to us we're done. Leadership has signaled to us we're done. What is the rationale that, frankly, do we need to be voting on anything at this point? We're done. You know, why is there a vote from this committee now needed for this report?
I thought you were just saying that you did believe that the committee needed a vote on this report, so I'm confused by that. I do know that we need to vote on some small parts of the revenue plan still, and so I do think there's a purpose for this committee. I do not believe we're done yet, but we're finishing up. That's how I see it. Charlie, do you have something?
Yeah, so we are going to have some votes today on a couple things that came up last time. And I would sort of reiterate that this report is really Echo Northwest's report, and we don't vote on it, but we have input on it. It is sort of an odd thing because Echo Northwest has worked closely with our committee, and so a lot of what Echo Northwest is reporting on is work that was done in collaboration with the committee, but it is really their report. And so we are not going to be voting on it. We're not going to be approving it or whatever, but we are going to have a chance to have input on it. And that's how I see it at this point. But we are going to have some votes today on some things.
And to your point, Charlie, I think that in terms of weighing in on the content of the report, I think we could have a compromise here where the committee members are able to do the track changes on the content as well by the 17th, so we could discuss those changes. So I agree with you there. Mary.
I guess, excuse me, I think I agree with Charlie that this really is Echo Northwest's report from the contract that they have with the board. But they've worked so closely with us. I mean, I really appreciate Morgan's efforts to, not say this is just Echo Northwest went in their corner and wrote a report. This really was a collaborative effort between this committee and the consultants. So I guess I am feeling like as long as it's kind of labeled, this is the Echo Northwest report, having worked with this committee or whatever, I'm not so sure that I think we really need to vote on it, but I'm still up in the air a little bit, but anyway, Jeff was the one who really started this, so maybe he should speak now.
Thank you. If it is a collaborative report, therefore it has our name on it. If it has our name on it, we should vote on it.
Mm.
And I've stunned everybody into silence.
Yeah, well,
Well-
I mean, we obviously don't have agreement with the commit, among the committee, so we need to take that back. But I would say for starters, when the draft report goes out, you can certainly provide track change revisions on the content as well, and just make suggestions on the structure if you have any. Or say thumbs up, it's good. So, Mary Lou.
I guess I just want to say again that at least I haven't been as involved as people like Charlie and Richard, and maybe Jeff, working with Morgan on all of these pieces that come to the committee. But I've felt a really nice collaboration and have been appreciative of the work that Morgan and Echo Northwest have done to collaborate with us. And so this report, I guess I'm kind of looking at the cover page or saying, this is the report from, Echo Northwest, having worked with this committee or however that is put. But in contrast to what I believe maybe the report from Milliman will be, that I don't know that it's going to be that everything was with the plan design and, whatever committee. It's been, in fact, I just guess I want to voice that I've been pleased with what Echo Northwest and especially Morgan has done with this committee. Watching from a bit afar about the Milliman report with the other committees and the board, I don't feel the same way. So I guess I just want to be sure that it comes across that this has been very collaborative with Echo Northwest and especially with Morgan.
Completely agree with you, Mary Lou. Thank you for
That's all.
saying that. Richard?
Echo Northwest and Morgan have been great to work with, very collaborative, tight at the hip. This is their responsibility to deliver a report. I don't believe it's for us to vote on. We're going to have adequate feedback with the ability to make line item comments and edits. And the other thing is this is a multi-year process. We're not making a single decision with this report. It's just a waypoint and a way to summarize what we've done for the last year. But I don't think that we need to vote on it. We'll have input and keep working on this over the next few years. Thank you.
Should we take a vote?
Richard, and back to you, Morgan.
What I would suggest here is maybe Cheryl, Mimi, and I can sort of come up with a plan here. But I appreciate all those comments, and particularly Jeff and John. I'm totally sensitive to it. It's just kind of it's given our contract and charge, it's kind of a weird partial overlap, and that's kind of why I want to make sure that you have some say, and maybe we can figure out a way to kind of address Jeff's point around feeling more emotionally satisfied that you could stand behind what's in there. Because I think, again, I don't sit in this committee. We've been trying to track along and try to bring a lot of the richness and new nuances to the conversation in the report, and we want to make sure that's there. So let's I would say we'll take that under consideration and try to find a plan that works for folks. All right. Next piece, I want to just maybe quickly, before we get into the revenue side, maybe flip a little bit, is to talk about the memo that we put forward on the reserves funding, and ask for two things. And maybe preface that with the way we left that off was, I think, Jeff and John's desire, and I think rightfully so, to really try to build a portfolio here that can be vetted by state budget staff, and with a little more capability to understand kind of the different issues related to sort of putting together a funding plan. So talking with both John and Richard, we were kind of like, let's think of this as sort of like a capital stack that we're trying to put together with kind of either low opportunity cost, high opportunity cost. I think everybody would love to see a minimal effect on either having to have more operating revenues or to start the taxes early to kind of fund a lot of those activities. So to what extent can we use the liquidity and reserves of existing either general purpose funds or healthcare related funds to basically provide that bridge in that transition? So I think that was kind of the overall big approach. And I think that's actually a really great value add for the board to think about this. And then we want to really to try to understand kind of like, well, if we're kind of strategically right, like to what extent can we think about sort of the relative magnitudes of dollars within the kind of tiers of money that we have in there? So I started putting together this memo with a few of our research folks to try to enumerate the different kind of tier 1, tier 2 dollars that are there. And then just to give you some scale, I think Charlie had kind of done this in our meeting too, but just like for every billion we have to raise, if we're thinking about trying to finance that, what it would be kind of our sort of load on the additional dollars we'd have to find. And I think that's kind of the situation everybody wants to try to minimize to an extent, whether you're trying to pay as you go or you're trying to finance it through sort of debt. Will be a sort of additional kind of line expense on the operations in servicing those reserves. So that was kind of the genesis of that. So my ask, either we can do this now, but I would prefer, probably given that we have some big conversations later in the meeting, reserve that for some homework for you to help us think through places that we're missing. And so I would ask that folks provide some comment to that memo, and just even if you don't, if great, hey, look at this fund. We always wondered if there's kind of an ability to borrow that, but tap into sort of your deep expertise to kind of say, what are we missing? Or comments of like, yeah, we should include this. But the way I think about this is something that goes to the board and the legislature, so they know, hey, that we got a big cost we're trying to move forward, but these dollars are here. And particularly I would say from a legislative perspective, there has to be some forward thinking around the administrative possibility of that, the legal issues, legislative issues that the state would have to solve in order to kind of make those dollars available. I mean, particularly, I think we had talked about like CCOs being a particular sort of issue there. So I think we really want to kind of think of it as sort of build an expansive list and discussion around that as a state kind of would think about sort of putting that together. Go ahead, Cheryl, and then Jeff.
Morgan, just a question about process. Do you want that feedback by email, or how do you want to do that?
I feel like it's most efficient. Yeah, I think like most efficient to work in that Word document. Oh, I think I said a PDF. But I'll resend it. Maybe I'll resend it in a Word document so folks
Okay.
can actually edit that easily. I think that'd be the most efficient one, unless people have some big picture things they think are worth discussion right now.
And by when do you need those comments?
I think it would be great by our next meeting.
This is the next meeting.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that way I can kind of consolidate that and see if there's any issues. Go ahead, Jeff.
Morgan, again, thank you for the work that you have done. Your conversation just now, was that about revenue? Was that about reserves? Was that about the report we're going to get?
That was about the reserves.
On the reserves. Okay,
Yeah,
so you skipped a few items on the agenda.
I thought, yeah, I feel like this was a shorter one, so I was just reordering a little bit. Sorry.
Okay, but we're going to come back to the reserve presentation. Yes?
We're going to go to the revenue presentation. The reserve was the memo that you got?
Yeah, I mean, but the reserve is on the agenda as item 5. Are we going to come back to that, or was this it?
This is it. Sorry, I was trying to swap it around a little bit to kind of move quickly. Yeah.
So are we going to have a discussion about the reserves now?
Yes, we can. Yes. So yeah, so my ask would be in that sort of initial list, any conversation or discussion. And then the second piece was really about homework for this group to go in there and revise and identify additional sort of funds or approaches that you think are germane, and then to kind of edit the memorandum. But Jeff, if you have conversation, now's the time.
Thank you. I have a couple, and then I'm defer to others, and I'm sure I'll have others.
Yeah.
My first question is, since this is your report, what is the recommended target for reserves? 1 month, 2 month, or 3 month?
So this is something we have it's not my recommendation, but this group has discussed, based on the literature, to kind of work on a kind of I would say, at least to the extent there's been conversation, to work on a sort of more expansive sort of reserve target. So the 3 month being the best sort of estimate between sort of financial and then past precedent of other programs. But we've been kind of holding both 1 and 3 in there just to kind of understand that there's still some big choices and uncertainty in that conversation.
Will the 1 month, 3 month, or 2 month be in the report that that you've drafted, the 70-page odd report we spoke about earlier? Is a recommendation going to be in there of 1 month or 3 months?
We don't have a recommendation, I don't believe, Cheryl, on sort of a target reserve policy.
Yeah, I don't,
So-
we don't, I mean, I'm not sure if that's a recommendation for this committee or for operations or transition. I honestly don't know. I guess I'd look to,
Yeah.
Mimi.
Yeah, I think the way that I'm understanding it and the way that Morgan has been presenting it to this committee is sort of the information behind each of those proposals, or each of the, 1 month, 2 month, 3 month, and all the rationale behind that, and providing as much information as possible about the pros and cons of it. And that's a discussion that will happen either strictly at the board, but I suspect it will come through the transition committee and then will go in front of the board for the board to have final deliberation.
So the Finance and Revenue Committee will not be making a recommendation on a number between 7 to 20 billion, which is 1 month to 3 months, included in the report that's going to go up in Eco Northwest's name to the board. Just, I want to be clear on that we will not have any recommendation on that, which is a non-trivial number in terms of revenue.
If I may, sorry,
What you're
Morgan,
saying
for
is we will
putting
not.
I think that there will be the opportunity, as Morgan was just talking about, for everyone to kind of look at that report, and you could certainly weigh in. So I think that in terms of input from this committee will still be put into that report.
Input meaning somebody else make the decision as to 1 month or 3 months.
I wouldn't phrase it like that. One could certainly consider people putting in their rationale as to why one might be more favorable than another.
I don't mean to be argumentative on this, but it seems to me that, again, the dollars are substantial. We have greater expertise collectively than the governance committee or the transition committee when it comes to these topics. Although I'm very grateful that Charlie and Richard will be on that transition committee. But it strikes me that we as a committee, one, should make a recommendation as to 1 to 3. The transition committee, the board can change it, but we should make a recommendation and as to how we are going to fund it. And I see lots of other hands up, so clearly I've generated conversation.
Yeah.
And if I just may add, certainly I think that I'll defer to Chair Ramirez, but if that is the desire, and if you all feel that you have enough information to make that, someone can certainly make a proposal during the upcoming meeting, Jeff, to make that recommendation. Yeah,
That's what I was going to say. And even in your comments back to Morgan, you can make a recommendation, and we'll review all the comments when we prepare for the meeting on the 17th. And if there's enough, if there's like a consensus on a particular recommendation for the reserves, we'll bring it up on the 17th.
But then that just goes back to that goes back to my original point earlier in this meeting. If we're going to if based on comments, there's going to be a recommendation included, I think it behooves us to see what the language is, what that recommendation is going to be about, and to say yay or nay. And this is not a criticism for Morgan or anybody else. It is just saying, when we're talking about dollars this substantive, we should be willing to take a position as to what we're recommending acknowledging there might be changes.
Yeah. No, I think, Jeff, I think that's a good question. It's really about the precision. So I would say we've been operating under a situation here on the reserve to say it's fluid. You know, given the cost and the work that needs to happen, it's hard to be precise with the numbers. So let's look what other people are doing, and provide an approach. So there will be a very big number, whether it's 1 or 3 months, and we'll have to think about how to fund and finance that. So I think we've been operating in this sort of like the product going to the board is one, how to think about this issue, you know, and the information best, you know, best available sort of practice in this space, and then to think about then the strategy. And what I think hearing from you is like, to what degree does this board need to be more precise with its sort of, you know, on a recommendation? And I'm not quite sure whether there's a formal charge that there is a recommendation on a reserve, like a financial policy on the reserve. And so I think that would be the kind of what I think, Jeff, the question you're calling is sort of the precision of which this group is sort of just advancing more than just the information and the thinking, but with a very specific sort of sense of like a financial policy for the reserve.
And I don't want to, I'm reluctant to use the word precision because I mean,
Yeah,
I'm very comfortable with numbers being vague, and I call this, you know, I'd rather be vaguely right than precisely wrong.
Yeah.
So, you know, if somebody says it's going to be another 3 months, we're assuming that that's 80 billion of operating expenses. Therefore, 3 months is 20. And I recognize that that would have a range, could be anywhere between 18 to 22. So I want to be careful.
Yeah.
I want to be careful on the use of the word precision.
Yeah, but in a sense here, I think you're what, if I understand, just so clarity for John and Richard and Charlie have comments, but is really about, do we feel like, given what we know about the cost, do we want to have a bigger or smaller buffer, I guess, in that sense of kind of like between 1 and 3? Got it.
1 month is 1 versus 3 is precise, but the dollars associated with 1 versus
Yeah, for sure.
3 is huge. And therefore we should make a recommendation to the governance board and the transition committee.
Right. No, I think that's a well-articulated sort of desire here that we should be talking about. Go ahead, John.
Yeah, but this is a good discussion, and I think it's good Jeff is getting this on the agenda and doing so in public. There's 2 other issues that I think are important enough that I want to mention here that we talked a bit about, Morgan, when we talked. The tier 1 strategies, which essentially involve accessing reserves of nonprofits, is a huge issue. It's a huge policy issue. It gets at the very definition of what a nonprofit is. And I am absolutely certain that activating those strategies will likely involve changing the definition of what a nonprofit is, especially as it relates to insurance. And it seems to me that that should be emphasized, because I think that's an issue that should be at the 2027 legislature. There's discussion about the nature of nonprofits that's taking place in this state. We've kind of ignored that. And, you know, I just want to put that on the table. If there's no desire to emphasize that and note that, well, that's just fine. The second is, I do think the reserve issue is an important one to consider in terms of the transition and phasing. I believe that the easiest population and revenue stream from a reserve point of view to transition will be Medicaid. A lot of that is because a significant portion of that money is federal. Significant portions are devoted to administrative issues for the payer. I think it's one of the reasons why Medicaid has gone first in the past when it comes to Oregon Health Plan, sorts of things. Again, if we think that's a key issue in terms of transition, we should say so. So those two issues, the nature of the nonprofit health insurance definition and a transition are things that I think should be addressed in the report, and I don't think currently are.
All right, Richard, and then
I found the 17-page reserves report very helpful. Learned about a lot of things I didn't know anything about. I consider it a first bounce. I don't think we're ready to make a decision on it yet. You can see that there are a lot of options between a full start and a staggered start of the insurance plan, new taxes versus borrowing, cost versus benefit. I need to hear from people at the state, both the political viability of these various sources and the financial viability and the trade-off. I see the big word I think on reserves is trade-off. The expense versus the value versus how we do the startup. That's a long discussion. We're not going to decide it here or on this committee, and I appreciate having a first round at it, but to be continued. Thank you.
thank you, Richard. Charlie?
So I agree with John's comments about some things that should be added to the report. And I also agree with Jeff that it would have been nice if we could have gotten to the point where we could make a recommendation. But I would also say that I couldn't make a recommendation based upon the information and knowledge that I have at this point. And that is among the reasons why I think that this committee should have continued. The board's made the decision to not continue. And so because of that sort of decision, I think we have to say, we don't have a recommendation because we did not have sufficient time to create a reasonable recommendation. And I think we just have to leave it at that. That would be what I would, if we were going to put something in the report, I would say, that's why there's no recommendation here. I'll stop there.
If I could just add something, I just want to note that we do have this topic up for a potential vote. And what I'm hearing is that we're not ready to vote on this, and we probably will not be as this committee. Okay.
Go ahead, Jeff.
Thank you. As part of this ongoing discussion, as I was reviewing the report over the weekend, and I appreciate getting it in advance. Thank you.
I would call it a memo, not a report, but work in progress.
Okay. Potato, let's call the whole thing off. Okay. I went through and looked at each of the recommended items in tier 1 and tier 2, and there were dollars associated with it. And then I tried to put a range on it of each of those items and added up the total, assuming we would get everyone, including getting the $1.9 billion out of Oregon's rainy day fund, which, as I think, I don't know who pointed out, getting that from the legislature to give up their rainy day fund is problematic at best, about the same level of probability as getting the reserves from SAFE. But even assuming we get all of those and a range of dollars, the total of that, tier 1 and tier 2, comes up to about $9 billion and change dollars, which barely exceeds, subject to all the qualifications, 1 month. And I apologize for repeating, these are non-trivial dollars, and I understand we've been shut down, but even within being shut down, we ought to have some comments about this in a report.
Yeah, Jeff, I would say, regardless of a vote, and I think with both Richard and Charlie, I would say, having been in similar sort of sides of staffing and in being on committees like this, there's a lot more to dig into than obviously this group has time to. So I would say, like I share your frustration with that. But I would say is, I think the value add is helping the transition committee and the board think about what needs to be done going forward in raising some of these big questions. Again, 'cause I think it's like, yes, like I couldn't, based on everything that we've have, gotten into, like we don't know enough about the nature of the startup and how much money, like I think John raised his point, like, well, what's going to be the phase in? Who's going to come in first? And what will kind of the first 18 months of spending really look like? And how do you actually finance that? And then, because it may change kind of how you think about the nature of the problem. So all to say is that memo that sent out, we would definitely appreciate your expertise in what advice and guidance like that next step needs to be to sort of, provide, to get the plan in a better shape in terms of the making, funding those reserves. So, I mean, I know it's like kind of less optimal than having, I mean, you could probably spend a year probably studying this specific issue. And so I think I'm trying to think about it's just like, given the reality of the time and effort we have, like how do we take what we have today and make it as good as possible in the next, 2 weeks to a month, where we can take your advice, like, hey, Morgan, you got to go look at this thing and make sure we do a little more research there to kind of get this in good shape. I think that's kind of the task going forward. And so, Jeff, I would say anything you have to say about that is that if you can kind of work within that memo piece and we can consolidate all that sort of good thinking as best we can.
Well, I think I've been doing a pretty good job of raising issues, and
No, for sure. These are all. I mean, like I said, we're all working in a kind of a difficult set of constraints here, and so I know it's like feels a lot. I would say emotionally not satisfying, but I do appreciate everybody kind of trying to do their best. So, go ahead, Mimi.
Thank you. I just want to say how much I appreciate everyone's comments and just the tenor of this meeting. I think it's been terrific and very beneficial to the discussion. And I would add that there is the Echo Northwest report that's going in, which there is this shorter deadline, absolutely. However, there is a report that is going to be coming from the Universal Health Plan Governance Board, the bigger report, and as much information as is available can go into that report. So even though it might not come from the Finance and Revenue Committee, and maybe it will come via the Transition Committee, but I just want people to understand that this type of input and discussion is still incredibly beneficial, and as much of this will be captured as possible in decisions and things like that. So understanding, as Morgan said, it is not particularly satisfying to have unanswered questions. And there will be more. It's not just the Finance and Revenue Committee that has unanswered questions by the time that this committee is ended, but we're going to do the best that we can to get all that information together. So thank you.
I might just do a follow-up going forward. I know the deadline is September to get it to the legislature. Will the report that goes to the legislature have a recommendation on reserves of 1, 2, or 3 months?
I don't know the answer to that, Jeff. I'm sorry.
And my suspicion is, given comments from the committee here about wanting to gain more understanding about this, that the answer is no. I hope I'm wrong, but I think we are punting, making a conscious decision based upon our the thinking to punt. And that's just, as Morgan pointed out, that's very, both emotionally and intellectually, not good. Thank you for letting me vent.
Right, John.
Yeah, and as I listened to Jeff, the last 2 weeks have been some soul searching for me. Realize the interstate bridge is a $20 billion one-time project, and look at what's happened to that, and look at the criticism of what was the financial planning around that, who's accountable for what, and how did this all come about. We're talking about a project that's $80 billion potentially, 70, $80 billion on an ongoing basis. And I can tell you, there will be folks who are going to look, or there should be folks who look at all the videotapes, all the audio tapes of these meetings to try and figure out, did the folks responsible for the finances of this ask all the right questions and get the right answers? Did anybody do anything? You know, I looked at the operations committee minutes in which they discussed the Milliman report. And it's interesting that the minutes describe, quote, sticker shock at the cost of the payer administration. Not surprising, because Milliman proposed essentially a large insurance company structure to run this. There's more than sticker shock. I mean, when you're talking about a $70 billion ongoing project, and the financial pieces aren't being addressed, it's a 5-alarm fire. And I think some of us are saying, you've got a 5-alarm fire here. You know, I admire the members of the transition committee because they're heading into it. The rest of us have been told to go home. The board needs to be responsible for that. And I think that large comment with the 100 or so signers makes it clear this work and this the discussion and votes we're having today is the most important issue in this process. Thanks.
Thanks, John. All right, so I would say, oh, sorry, Mary Lou, go ahead. Oh, you're on mute, sorry.
I've been sitting here kind of silent as a board member. I didn't sleep well last night, thinking about this meeting and about a lot of the things that are facing us. And the fact that this transition committee made up of, 2 members of each of the other committees, and that I voiced that I was willing to jump onto that too. And listening to this today, and I did bring up the board, if people watched the last meeting, the possibility that we ask for an extension on this report. I'm still believing that is something we should do. I understand the part about, Cheryl's saying, getting the stuff in front of the 27 committee, the board, the legislature, and, all of that. However, in the fall, I believe there's going to be so much focus on elections, et cetera, that I'm not sure who's going to be paying much attention to anything else at that point. But I am really, and I voted along with the rest of the board to shut down the committees because there was very good reason from the administrative side, from Mimi, from the, the staff, all of those pieces. But kind of listening to this today and listening to what John's saying, I'm just very concerned about shutting this group down. That, we aren't all experts. I'm certainly not. Okay. But listening to, I really respect the people on this committee and the work that Morgan's done. And I'm just very uncomfortable with that we made that decision. And where is that work going to go to? And the 2 people, Charlie and Richard, being willing to say they're going to be on the transition committee, but all of the pieces, I'm just thinking that maybe I made a bad vote to shut this committee down. And maybe there's nothing we can do.
If I can add, it is the board's responsibility to look at the reports from all of the committees and figure out where they may not agree, and they need the time to work that out. Also, it was stated very clearly at the board meeting more than once that we welcome your input, whether we have, you know, after the Finance and Revenue Committee shuts down, you are still more than welcome to provide feedback on what the board is doing, what the transition committee is doing. So it's not like you're shut down and you just go, you know, you go away and you don't have any say. You still are able to provide input on what we're doing at the board level.
I hear you, Cheryl, on that, but it's not quite the same. And I think that there just are, especially in the Finance and Revenue, and maybe the other committees would say the same thing, you know, because I've not been part of them. But it really feels like the first question everybody asks the minute somehow how they hear that I'm on this thing, you know, well, how are we going to finance it? That is absolutely their number one question. And here I'm a member of this committee, and I say it's complicated and we don't quite have it all figured out. And we're, you know, I don't know. I just feel like this, I'm really uncomfortable today and doing my best to fulfill my duties, both as a member of this committee and as a board member. And when I think about the board, we have, you know, 3.5 hour now meetings for a few more months with people who haven't dived into this at the level that this group has. And I guess I'll just stop because I'm just going to kind of keep repeating myself.
Great. Well, I'll just say, where does that leave us? I think we have some. I think we all agree that there's a lot of work on this piece, and what I would ask everybody here is to, I would say, in the short run, I'll work with Chair Ramirez and maybe to figure out the right landing spot for this piece. But I think if we can keep moving this piece forward, I think that is all value add. It has to go that direction anyways. So in the time we have, let's try to work in that space.
Morgan, I didn't raise my hand, was jumping in.
Yep.
Our agenda on this item, reserve and startup revenue strategy, inform, discuss, and vote. We have been informed. What is the vote?
I'm going to jump in there, Morgan. Jeff, apologies for jumping in, but sometimes on the agenda, if there is the potential for a vote, I will just put vote on the agenda so the public can be aware that there may be one. After having discussion with Morgan and with Chair Ramirez, the decision was that there was not, at this point, a vote to be had on the specifics of the reserve revenue strategy. So
and I just want to add,
that's why it looks like that.
Yeah, I just want to add, this came out in this discussion that some of your fellow committee members said they weren't able to vote on this yet. And so we've asked for input on the memo by the 17th. And I still heard some of you say that you don't think you can vote on the 17th either. So the action item for this particular agenda item is that you provide feedback on the memo to Morgan. And we cannot vote.
I can tell you right now, for my vote on this one, it is no. Bethany in her chat box pointed out that her clinic, apologize, Bethany, if I got named wrong, has 3 months. And the laundry list, and I appreciate the laundry list that Morgan and his team put together for tier 1 and tier 2. But some of them are, how should we say, aren't going to happen. Rating safe reserves isn't going to happen. Although, again, I appreciate your putting it on the list. So there should be additional discussion. But when we have a vote on this reserves policy, even whether it's not today or not the next meeting, mine's no, because this is not substantive enough, even with comments that people are going to send in the next 2 weeks, to go to the board and the transition committee.
Okay, thanks, Jeff. Morgan, could you continue with the next agenda item?
Great. I'll move us along here. So the next piece we have on, and I'm sorry I swapped this in a little bit, but that we could move a little quicker, is just to update you on work that uh, was on here. So I think let me just get this. Great. Was something once Milliman provided their new cost target to plan design. The idea was always for these things to kind of meet together in terms of the work we've done. So I don't, these are old, right? You've seen these before, but we've been working in 2022, right? We have a cost target, a revenue replacement target that are meant to sort of mimic those dollars that would not be transferable. We would have to kind of reconfigure in order to fund the universal health plan. Right, this group has been working on a sort of at least a range starting anywhere from about 15 to 23 billion dollars in 2022 dollars for modeling purposes, assuming administrative savings and other types of controls. Right, we've been working on an
Morgan,
acre of sorry.
I'm sorry, Morgan. I'm just going to interject. What you're showing on the screen is like the presentation, or is not the presentation mode. So I think it might be
Gotcha.
hard for people to read it. Thank
Yeah,
you.
no.
Sorry for interrupting.
No, it's always PowerPoint will always surprise you on what
Yes,
screen it
yes,
decides
it
to show.
will. There we go. Thank you so much.
Right. Thank you. Great. So, again, we've been working that 16.9 revenue target to do all the revenue work. Oh, no. Oh, great. Okay. So, again, right, Milliman's work has put that plan in 2032 dollars, anywhere from 94 to 74 billion. As a sort of 2032 cost. The proposal that will have to go to the state legislature, right, is to say what would the rates need to be in 2032 in order to fund the universal health plan. And so our question was always, oops, why? Sorry. Our question was always, how does the revenue replacement target line up with the work that this group has been on? And basically, is that a right estimate to sort of peg our revenue replacement target to? And so Charlie, Richard, and I have been working with Milliman to try to better understand how they put together their cost target, understand the line of businesses, to understand kind of like, well, to what extent are we talking about transferable dollars that would be part of, waivers through Medicaid and Medicare? What would the state portion be? How do we think about sort of the additional benefits that we were planning for in the Optimus, benchmarking out the Optimus work versus the work that's in Milliman? And I think the key challenge we've gotten to here, that is the work that has been put forward thus far on the Milliman side, is great, right? It's, comparable, at least directionally, with the work we've been doing. But the challenge is that we can't quite do kind of a one-for-one, apples-to-apples sort of look at the sources of funding for those expenses in the same way that we had sort of driven that off in our revenue modeling. Right, so we're really trying to kind of reconcile two different accounting frames that are just difficult. And I think, Jeff, was like, we just can't we can't sort of backtrack with precision, at least in the short amount of time, to kind of get there. And so what I think this means here is there a practical path forward here that gets us to a 2032 number that we feel would be a good place for the Legislative Revenue Office to pick up to solve for rates? And so Charlie did some just look at the NEHA data, and particularly in the core sources of revenue and spending that we are trying to replace, and to think about what is there kind of a good escalation rate that we feel could be, practical, right, for us to kind of move forward. And so, Charlie, jump in here if I kind of miss anything, but there are different relative growth rates that the kind of components, they're all in the kind of the 4 to 4.5. And so I just, as a sort of like more conservative, said that let's pick the sort of the particularly the bigger ones and the highest rate. Let's just assume that those pieces are growing at about 4.4%, reflecting kind of that expenditure. And so that puts our 16.9 billion in 2026 at about 20.1 billion that we would solve for. And moving forward to 2032 would be $26 billion is kind of our revenue replacement target. And that would be kind of call it the practical placeholder that would support the either future scenario testing by the board, work with LRO to kind of do the solve for rate modeling with that. Richard's also done some work just to kind of understand the cost. I see Richard popping up there. The Milliman cost target with sort of the using the NEH data, and it puts us in, I would say, a similar but just sort of different. And Richard can maybe jump in there and talk a little more about cost target. So all to say is we're trying to think about like using different approaches to think about the Milliman cost target with other sources so that we can feel comfortable with escalating our revenue replacement target to a 2032 value. Great. So I'll stop there just to kind of pause and take any questions on this process. But just, the task here was like, is our revenue replacement target reasonable? What might be a way to sort of sync that with the plan design Milliman estimate? And can we get to a 2032 number, right? Was always the idea that LRO would pick up and do much more sort of solve for rate modeling using their much more extensive tools. Go ahead, Richard.
So the way I conceive of it is there's two different 2032 numbers. One is what total expenditures will be in Oregon.
Yeah.
And I think that we have pretty good agreement on that. I like the Milliman report. I've structured a spreadsheet that shows us how we get from 2026 to 2032. That's all good. The second 2032 number is what is the funding gap, meaning we're making up for employer-sponsored private health insurance premiums and individuals and families out of pocket. That's a different number from total expenditures, of course. So my question is, and maybe Charlie and Morgan, you can reassure me, is that we're assuming that that we're moving around this racetrack year by year under the yellow flag and nobody changes relative position. My concern is, and I hope to be reassured it's not a problem, is that if Medicare and Medicaid funding are relatively low or flat, in the case of Medicaid even decreasing, but yet costs are going up of labor and of supplies relentlessly, that right now, or at least over the last 5 or 8 years, it's been the private health insurance market and employers and families with their higher premiums and cost sharing that are taking up the slack. But over going from 2026 to 2032, will that gap widen relative to what Medicare and Medicaid are doing? So actually our funding gap is more than the 4.4%, not because 4.4% isn't the right overall growth rate, but because the other two funding mechanisms, public, Medicaid and Medicare, are flatter than 4.4%. And so that the private health insurance market needs to make up more. And so we need to make up more than the 26 billion in 2032. I hope to be reassured, but I ask other committee members what your thoughts are. Thank you.
I have a thought, but I'll let folks in the committee go first. Go ahead, Charlie.
Don't have any reassuring thoughts. I would say that that's a good worry, or not a good worry, a bad worry, but an appropriate worry. And we, at this point, I would say it's premature to actually figure one way or the other. I mean, a lot of it's not going to depend just upon what the federal government does. It does depend upon that, but it's also going to depend upon what's the state response to that. And at this point, I would say we don't know.
Okay.
Yeah. Go ahead, Jeff.
I agree. We don't know. That doesn't mean we can't provide a range, but I think the fact that the number is now at 26, give or take, is a reflection of, for lack of a better phrase, the Interstate Bridge Replacement Project. Every time a number comes out, it's bigger.
Yeah, so I think one of the things that the transition committee and the board will obviously be thinking about as they think about the plan, will be also be thinking about this in ranges. Like we benchmark this to a number for the ease of having a very productive conversation on the structure. But again, like in reality, right, we're probably having to be thinking about sort of higher or lower sort of pieces, which is like part of the next part of the conversation is to get a little more advice and guidance in that space. But go ahead, John.
Yeah, just a couple of comments. You know, first of all, one of the things I did was reread the document from January of 2025, the guidance document for this committee. And I hope all committee members read that before any final votes. We're very far away from what that guidance document suggested. For example, the guidance document specifically said, use NHEA and don't create a situation where you can't match up any subsequent calculations. Don't do that. You know, I'm still scratching my head how it could be that we're not able to move from Optimus and to Milliman, and because Milliman did it in a different way. I mean, did they read that guidance document? Did whoever was working with them in leadership say, here's this guidance document. If you're going to do this work, you have to do it the way the committee. You know, I mean, Morgan, I think you're a master of the term directionally comparable. You know,
it's a really big number.
You remind me of an arbitrator in mediation going back and forth between two parties. Unlike Richard, I don't support anything in the Milliman report. Anything. There's a number of estimates in there that again, I think in defense of Milliman, they may not have been briefed. And you know, as you know, I mean, I've almost at every meeting I brought up my concerns about administrative costs. In this example, I wouldn't start with 17. I'd start with 10. As I think if there's any decent approach here in terms of cost containment and not delivery, I completely agree with Ms. Snyder's comments. Not cost containment of the delivery system, but cost containment of the administrative system. If there's any reasonable effort to prioritize those, we're starting at 10 billion and not at 17. But there hasn't been. There has been no effort to seriously bring that number down. And I guarantee you, I've been in senior staff of billion-dollar corporations. In a situation like this, the finance folks would be just going nuts. That the cost folks are not doing their job. You know, they'd be walking out of that meeting, no way are we going to raise revenue when you've got when you don't have an administrative cost plan. So that's where I'm at.
Charlie.
So I'll have to disagree with John a little bit there, that the 17 billion revenue estimate actually assumes a lot of administrative savings already. If we didn't have the administrative savings in there, we'd be closer to the 22 billion number that we need to raise. So the 17 billion is actually making assumptions of substantial administrative savings. And I also agree with John's agreement with Barbara that we do need to think of, I mean, we do need to think about providing more care and actually hopefully increasing the number of providers in Oregon, which in some ways justifies some of what Milliman was saying when they have induced demand, and I actually have argued that maybe there wouldn't be induced demand because there wouldn't be more providers to pay for it. But in fact, it would be nice if we had more providers to pay, and therefore we probably should say that, yeah, we're going to increase the expenditures. So, but we'll still have to have large administrative savings to get anywhere close to the numbers that we've worked at this point. So,
Thank you, Charlie. Go ahead, Mary Lou.
I listened to a presentation a couple of days ago on the idea nationwide of getting MCOs, managed care organizations, and our state would be CCOs out of being the middleman for Medicaid, and looking at the potential savings. And for example, Connecticut that has done this, et cetera. But the one thing that it started out with in the presentation was that Milliman had done an estimate for that project of how much would be saved by getting that middleman out and actually having states run their Medicaid program like they used to and like Medicare does. And the Milliman quote that started that was a 13% reduction. So it was kind of like, well, that's some part of Milliman, a huge big company, and I'm not sure which actuaries, but it was kind of like, whoa, they think we could save, 13% by getting the middleman out of the delivering of Medicaid services. So anyway, just kind of an interesting, these numbers, these percentages, these estimates, really are difficult to understand and comprehend. And especially when various parts are saying different things. So anyway, and it was all around administrative cost savings. So interesting. Physicians for a National Health Plan have that presentation on their website.
Thank you, Mary Lou. Jeff.
Thank you. Two additional thoughts. About a year ago, possibly longer, but very early on in the process of this committee's work, we unanimously requested a statement of revenue and expense. So we can do where we are now and where we are afterwards. And we've made no progress. We've made progress, but we haven't been able to see that. So I offer that right now as a suggestion for you, Morgan, in the draft report that you're working on. There should be a statement of revenue and expense by categories so we can see where it is. Number two, we also very early on adopted, and I think the governance board approved it, that the work must provide actuarially sound fiduciary rates with confidence intervals or ranges. We've left that standard. So we have some additional work that needs to be done, the transition committee needs to do going forward. So those were the two thoughts: statement of revenue expense and stepping away from the principle that we established early on of actuarial-based standards.
Thank you, Jeff. And when you say statement of revenue, I mean, are you talking about like a P&L kind of level of detail?
A P&L, yes. The top 9 or 10, I'm making up a number, but the several revenue categories and the expenses broken out, the operating expenses and the admin expenses. Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Great. Well, I'm going to move us because I feel like I think there's some agreement here that we're probably in the right area, and the 4.5, I would say, is a practical and reasonable place to kind of think about next steps. But I would say I think, as everybody realizes, quite an opportunity for it to be more and maybe less than kind of that 26 billion in 2032. So the feedback I think that would be useful in discussion here to the board would be, how would you think about your current revenue proposal? I know we're going to be talking about some changes in the second half of the meeting. But given the structure you have today, If it has to be higher or lower than what we've been discussing, how do you want to think about what does it mean to kind of raise to either kind of reduce $1 billion worth of spending or raise an additional $1 billion of spending for this, right? And I think that, from a discussion perspective, two ways to think about this is like scale and rebalancing kind of your structure. And so when I say scale, it's really thinking about is like, hey, is there, if we have to raise an additional billion or lower billion, we would simply just pro rata kind of think about keeping the shares similarly and kind of reducing taxes within that structure in a pro rata sort of way, so that we have sort of a similar sort of burden in the future than we have today, right? So it's the most simple way to kind of say like, yeah, the structure we have today would work where they're raising 16, 9.9, 20, 25, 10 billion, whatever it is. But like that structure and the sort of outputs of that with respect to sort of progressivity and payment burden, it is pretty portable kind of in that pace. The second way to say it is, right, well, we've really been solving for 17 billion and we like, and that's a good structure in terms of those outputs. But gosh, if we had to raise another 1, 2, 3 billion, we don't really want it to come from these households or from these payers, and we really want to rebalance that that payment. So when you kind of reflect on our structure as it exists today, and you think about sort of potentially entertaining this, do you fall into kind of the sort of scale camp? Or is there kind of a part of it you want to say like, well, no, we really kind of need to rebalance it, right? Like maybe more burden should fall on, corporations, or more burden should fall on sort of certain households or something like that. And so I kind of posit these two ends here really to kind of get some initial feedback and thoughts on where you are as a group that would kind of, that we can add into the discussion of our plan as it reflects this sort of like dynamism around what the actual revenue replacement target is likely to be. Go ahead, Jeff.
Are these to be automatic? As in, I believe the Taiwanese model, when the dollars and reserves fall below, I think it's 3 months, there's an automatic tax increase? Or is 1 month? Okay, thank you, Mary Lou. Is it, going back, is it an automatic adjustment, whether it's, rebalance or scale? Or is it an item to be discussed? Can you elaborate on that question?
Yeah. So to me, I think about it as more consideration on your existing plan. So, but I think it touches on this issue that we talked about with the reserve policy. Like what if we had to raise additional money to cover, higher reserve than we were targeting, right? How would you recommend this group think about it? Not necessarily in the sort of automatic stabilizers perspective, but we could add that in there. But I mostly just think about it from whatever our revenue replacement target is, right? Like we've been solving for 17 billion in 2022, but imagine if we were solving for 20 billion instead, or 14 billion instead in 2022. Would you want the same structure or a different structure? Does that make sense?
It does, but I'm not sure it answered the question of automatic versus discretionary.
Yeah, I don't have an opinion on that. I would say that when I was broaching this thing, it was mostly about guidance to the board, as they think about, the revenue proposal. Like how would if they said like, oh, like let's say when, work is done and then we get to, we think, oh, wait, instead of it being a comparable 26 billion in 2032, we actually think it's 30 billion, right? Because we've loaded on the operating reserves and things of that nature. And so if the board asked you like, well, how should we raise that additional 4 billion above the structure you've recommended? What would it's really kind of what advice and guidance would you give them is kind of, I think, the way I framed it. Yeah.
Shouldn't our guidance include automatic versus discretionary?
Yeah, I'm open to that. I mean, this is kind of,
Okay.
I just want to make sure you were understanding kind of how I teed this up, but yes.
No, I understood. Thank you.
Oh,
But
okay.
Thank you.
And I don't have an opinion, so I guess that I'm curious. Do you have a strong opinion on whether or not sort of an approach for managing that situation?
People have suggested that all my opinions are strong, but I don't want to go there. But I would suggest that my default mode would be that it is a discretionary decision, not an automatic, whether it is rebalance or scale. That it should not be taken out of the hands of, if you will, our legislature, and simply given to a board to automatically adjust.
Thank you. Charlie.
Well, first of all, I would think, I don't know if you could do anything that would be automatic. I'm not sure you could write a law that would be constitutionally appropriate for an automatic adjustment. I mean, that'd be one question. But I think that the question that Morgan asking is pretty different. It's just to get to a first pass of like, what do we recommend? What is the board going to recommend to the legislature for a tax plan? Would we recommend that it just be scaled, or would we rebalance? I guess that's kind of the question. And it, to me, the heart of that issue would, I would say mostly you would just raise the HCPIT unless we also did something else with the EPT, and that's changing the or having a tiered rate so that companies with, say, between 500,000 and 10 million of payroll pay a different rate than those with over 10 million of payroll. So I think that if you did a tiered rate, then raising the rate on the highest tier would be another thing that could be useful. But we don't have that at this point. We haven't recommended that. I'm not sure we're going to be ready to vote on that, but it's something that I think that the board and the transition committee should be considering at some point. The other pieces that are small, the corporate income tax, corporate excise tax, and the corporate activity tax, that could be, I think, scaled as well if we needed to get more revenue. So I think that in general, scaling is the appropriate thing to do because the particular choices that have been made for purposes of perceived fairness to a large extent. So I'll stop there.
All right, no, thank you, Charlie. Chenwei.
Yes, I just want to share Taiwan's experience about the timing and the mechanism to raise the tax. When it was legislated, it was written into law that the National Health Insurance should maintain at least 3 months reserve. And then if the reserve is below 1 month expenditure, then the administration should raise tax. So that, even though it was written into law, it was never practiced because there were many times the reserve were down to less than one month. And then the Ministry of Health, that's the ministry overseeing the National Health Insurance, always hesitated because to raise tax is a huge political issue. And so in the end of last year, it celebrated 40 years anniversary. So in that 40 years of implementing National Health Insurance, on average, the tax was raised probably around once in a small percentage every decade. And so that's the reality. So the reality is, even if it was written into law, in practice, it's very difficult to follow.
Thank you. John.
Yeah, I mean, I struggle with this again because, you know, it's like the board is asking us to raise the revenue without really dealing with the cost issue. You know, Charlie, my sense is where we're at from a cost issue is that the single payers administrative costs are at 7%. They could be at 4%. They could be lower than 4%. They're at 7%. And that the delivery system administrative expense reduction is at 8, it could be at 16, it could be at 20. Now, where do you think the public's going to want this to come from? They're going to want it to come from administrative costs. And, you know, there's no discussion. I mean, what would happen in reality? You would hope that the single payer would sit down with the delivery system where 93% of the dollars are going. What can we do? How can we collaborate to figure this out? Rather than giving the impression the first thing is we want more taxes. So again, I just am feeling very uncomfortable with a process that I don't think reflects reality. And I want to say, though, that this is important. I mean, what happened in COVID when things were really terrible? Government actually stepped in and created an emergency. People got to stay on Medicaid. Revenues from the government actually increased to the CCOs. Did the CCOs send those dollars down? Not much. You know, we had layoffs. We had huge delivery system problems because of a lack of funding. So it's very important to, I think, communicate to the public what would you do when things got worse. I sure wouldn't do it the way we did it in COVID. And I think that's one of the rationales for a single payer that has a cooperative and collaborative relationship with the delivery system.
Thank you, John. Cheryl?
I am not familiar with scale, to be honest. I was trying to understand it, and rebalance I'm more familiar with, just with the legislature. Morgan, do you have advice on which approach to take, or are you neutral? I just wanted to hear from you.
Technically, I'm neutral. This is a really question I think Charlie kind of got to the essence. Do you feel comfortable when you kind of had your policies? I mean, we developed that proposal based on policies around, distributing the cost, creating low rates, right? Mimicking kind of the system, designing a very progressive sort of tax structure. And I guess to the extent that we had visibility into what anybody has visibility to what the number will be in 2032, right? Do you feel comfortable with that structure solving for, what we're saying, 26 billion, but say like 28 billion? Do you feel like, yeah, we feel pretty good about the structure we have, and that pro rata, you would just move those rates up, equally across the different sources to maintain kind of the similar sort of profile of tax burden between business and individual payers, and then within the personal income tax, given the set of credits that you have talked about with the EPT, the Medicare Part B, and the distribution of that as a sort of effective tax rate across individuals, right? So the question is, if the number, and the number will be different regardless, right? So when you get to 2032, but do you feel like that structure is robust enough that you could kind of scale it up and down? Or do you worry if we have to raise, 10% more? Oh, well, we don't want it to we want it to come from, the next dollar we want to come from somebody else or from some other source, right? And so that's the fundamental question that I think it's important to kind of discuss, given that we're at this spot around what's the revenue replacement target going to be in 2032? And what if it's more or less, and what guidance would you give to the board?
Okay.
Yeah.
I think I understand better. I do wonder, though, if like the political climate changes or the economy, if the structure would need to be tweaked or not. I just don't know the answer to that. And I do agree with Jeff's comment that it should be discretionary and not automatic. So that would be either whether it was scale or rebalance, right?
True. Yeah. I mean, to me,
Automatic.
to me, that's about going forward, right? How do you
Uh-huh.
manage the tax burden? This is really more about just like your plan today.
Okay.
Like we've been so fixated on just trying to get the structure right at 16.9, But,
Mhm.
you know, would your conversation have been different if it was 20, right?
Right.
And I think that's the question I'm calling.
Okay, thanks, Morgan.
Right. Anyway.
I just want to comment on earlier we talked about the administrative costs. And administrative cost is a big box, and there are different dimensions of it. And so far, we probably were not able to get even close to accurate estimation. So for example, there are at least 3 big boxes within administrative costs in addition to other smaller ones. One is the insurers administrative cost. That under the universal health insurance, it will be the public entity that's going to govern it. And then the second will be the provider's administrative costs. And the provider administrative cost is where we expect universal healthcare to get a huge saving. But again, we don't have any close to accurate estimation. And then the third, probably a little bit smaller box, is employer, particularly large employers reduce administrative costs because they no longer have to negotiate with multiple insurers every year. They have the one single universal healthcare. And so one of the challenge for any country, state to start a brand new program, you will see there will be items you don't have baseline. But even though we don't have baseline about how those administrative costs, whether it's the insurer will have better ideas, but providers, but we don't have baseline. We have some estimation, but no baseline, and then employers. But to accurately estimate the actual costs, we need to do a good job to estimate those dimensions of administrative cost savings. Thank you.
No, thank you. Jeff.
My default mode is rebalance, but I could be persuaded otherwise because we do have the example, to Charlie's point, the State Accident Insurance Fund, which adjusts their rates up or down based upon actuarial standards. But since we are not doing actuarial standards for this program, that's why I go back to rebalance. And then the follow-on to that is, are you looking for a show of hands? What each of us think about rebalance versus scale?
We don't have to do a show of hands. It's not a voting thing. This is really kind of context and sort of, you know, think of it as in the report, some guidance and considerations for thoughts that the board can understand, like what, you know, I think Charlie articulated like why he thinks you could scale this up. You know, what would be good to know, Jeff, from you is like, why, you know, what is this about the current revenue plan that you think, yeah, we might want to think about rebalancing this and this why? You know, you know, there's no, I think, necessarily right answer, right? But I think what we're trying to make sure is that that we're trying to be exhaustive to the issues and questions that you think are germane to that. So,
well, I'll express, repeat. You put a 1 of 8 here at the committee. Put me down as a rebalance, not before scaling, subject to all the comments that have been made previously.
can I follow up? When you say rebalance, like what is it about the current plan that you feel like would need to be rebalanced if we had to raise another $1 billion?
You want to get specific now?
And to the extent that I just to understand kind of why you're in the rebalance camp. Sorry.
Because it goes back to not being actuarial based. Therefore, I want to have that discussion to occur as to what are we going to raise, what are we going to cut, what's going to be the combination potentially of those two.
Yeah, okay, understood. Okay, Charlie.
So Jeff may have answered the question I have. I basically had a question of Jeff was like, when to me, rebalancing means you would raise one of the taxes, but not another.
Yes.
And so if we're going to do that, which tax would you think we should raise and which shouldn't we raise?
Fair point. I'm taking rebalances, meaning we look at all the line entries on the revenue and expense side and adjust each of them or not, or some of them, or all of them accordingly to rebalance to get back to our target, as opposed to just simply taking one item.
Oh, okay. I see what you're saying, Jeff. Okay, you're thinking much more holistically of like we might be able to kind of raise some other rate outside of the revenue replacement target we've been talking about, and to get us back to kind of to fit our structure, as opposed to
Yes.
kind of our revenue replacement target that we've been modeling all along.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. Having lived through that kind of discussion analytics in my business career, yes.
Yeah, I gotcha. All right. And just for the record, I think Charlie's clear. It's really about sort of the tax. We're really talking about the tax proposal, not necessarily kind of the broader scope of what I think you're suggesting. There are a range of costs we'll have control over. Might be have some more flexibility on some of the revenue, perhaps whatever changes on the federal and state side. But go ahead, John.
Yeah, just for the record, I totally agree with Chun Wei's previous comments. I just, for the record, want to remind everybody that Jill Arena provided a fabulous presentation here. And at the conclusion of her presentation, she suggested, if not urged, that a analysis and modeling process could provide much better estimates of how much administrative savings there would be on the delivery system side. Again, that topic seems to have disappeared, but I hope it shows back up at the Transitions Committee, because again, it's something I'm not sure it can be done this year, but it can certainly be done. And it's not a reason to not get more aggressive than we are. Thanks.
Thank you, John. Mary Lou?
My question is, can you tell me, Jeff, what it is that I'm confused on, that we're not actuarially basing this, or whatever it is? What is it? Help me understand.
Certainly. Although I might defer, let me open my statement by saying I am not an actuary.
Thank the
and
Lord.
so, yeah, yeah, yes, yeah. Actuaries exist to make accountants look exciting,
Yeah.
but it is taking into and analyzing all of the demographics. I'll use SAFE as an example, or the PERS retirement system. You examine all of the demographics, both in the current year and the past year. You look at examine what projected revenues and expenses might be. You look on the question of SAFE. You look at what accidents have been, what efforts are underway to correct, and then you factor that all into I won't say black box, but into a model, which then spits out the rates that are based upon all the available data available for that impacts, in the case of SAFE, workers' safety.
But isn't that, I mean, am I naive to think that's not what supposedly Milliman did?
Milliman is an actuarial firm, but they said with respect to going back on the reserves, they said, well, I think it was Eco Northwest who said it, maybe it was Milliman who said actuarial standards for reserves would not be applicable. It would bankrupt the system.
Oh, so you're talking the reserves, not.
I'm just talking as a general statement about using actuarial standards, but I use the reserves as an example.
Yeah, that's a risk-based capital approach, I think, where the standards are much higher, and that's kind of why everybody's in kind of the 1 to 4. But and Fritz, you probably have a thought there, but maybe go quick to answer that question for Mary Lou. Oh, Fritz, you might want to take yourself off mute. Oh.
Sorry, I was not able to take myself off mute. Yeah, I don't think we made that statement, but the statement is correct in the sense that if you had a risk-based capital that would be applicable to, say, a managed care company, any type of an insurer, that would be almost certainly an insurmountable hurdle in terms of funding a plan. To put up that kind of a capital up front, I would think that would be almost impossible. As far as the actuarial standards, there's a lot of things in play here, but very quickly, I'll just say our estimates were actuarially correct in the sense that we used actual costs. And those, those are experience-based costs. That's actually what things are costing right now, and then projected that forward. I think where the definition of actuarial gets a little bit blurred is that in a lot of cases, especially when it comes to funding, there's a lot of politics that come into play. People want to make certain decisions around who pays what. Different individuals or groups of individuals may or may not be paying their true costs. And there may be a lot of different reasons for that. Politics could be one. Law could be another one. The ACA is a great example of that, where people are not paying their actuarially correct costs, and that's by design. So there's a number of different ways that you can construe or talk about what is, quote, actuarial. So I'll pause there because I know time is limited.
Go ahead, Cheryl.
Yeah, I feel like we need to wrap this up because we have 2 other agenda items where we actually might vote. We're not voting on this today. I personally need more time to mull this over anyway.
That's
It's
fine.
complicated. I don't know if we'll vote on this on the 17th, but we can.
To me, this is not a voting thing. This will be kind
Uh-huh.
of reflected in the report for
Mhm.
your thoughts. And so mostly this is a way to kind of get you thinking about this issue, because I think it is important guidance that you can give to the board as part of your recommendation.
So this would be another topic that we would provide input to you in the interim, do you think?
Certainly.
Okay. All right, thanks, Morgan.
Great.
I'd like to take a very quick break. We have still a lot on the agenda. Could we just make it 5 minutes and just get back just right after 11? Okay, thank you so much. We'll get started just as soon as I see Morgan and Charlie on screen. So I think they're going to tag team on this next one. There's Morgan.
I think it's mostly Charlie, but I'm here.
Charlie's here.
Okay.
He's on screen.
Oh, Charlie's on screen. I can't see him on my
And
screen.
actually, I'll stop sharing because we don't have slides for this presentation.
okay,
So you can
okay.
see everyone.
All right, so I'll hand it to Morgan and Charlie for this part, the revenue proposal revisions.
So Morgan, do you want me to go ahead?
Yeah, why don't you go ahead, Charlie? I'm here. I'll play. I'll just support.
So actually, before we go ahead, I did want to bring up one thing, and we've talked about the estimates of how much new revenue we're going to need, and we probably should be using words slightly differently. That it's something like revenue restructuring, because it's presumably not new revenue. It's revenue that's already being spent on healthcare, but now we're going to redo it in some manner. So it is again,
revenue replacement.
Well, yeah, but I think revenue replacement might not be quite the best word. I think so. I'm going to suggest something like revenue restructuring.
Yep.
Okay. So there's a couple things that have come up in my thinking about what we're doing, and one is that we've already decided that we're going to have a 100% credit for Part B premiums. That only helps those who have a tax liability. The majority of Medicare recipients, Medicare eligible folks in the new plan would not have any new tax liability. And because of that, they would have very little reason to pay their Part B premium. They could just say, well, the state's going to cover my care anyway, so why should I pay the Part B premium? So I kind of think that we're going to need to pay the Part B premium for everybody who would be eligible for Medicare if we did so, or if the Part B premium were paid by somebody. So the Medicaid already pays the Part B premium for dual eligibles, and some of that money comes to the federal government and some is matched by the state. So that's already covered. The Part B premium credit would pay it for those who would have a tax liability. But again, there's those in the middle who do not have enough non-Social Security income to have a new tax liability that, as I said, wouldn't have an incentive. If we did pay that, it would require about another $1 billion of revenue restructuring to get that money so that the state could pay that. I think that's something we're going to need to do. My understanding is that the task force also eventually came to that conclusion as well. I don't remember seeing that in the task force information, but I think that's something we should at least talk about. And my suggestion is, yeah, we should pay it. Otherwise, we're going to have trouble. So that's, I guess, should I bring up the next thing as well, or should we discuss this one first?
I feel like we should discuss this first because there could be a vote, and I want to make sure I understand the proposal because I'm not sure if I'm there yet. So I'd like to hear a bit
Okay.
more.
Okay, so John, go ahead.
Yeah, I think this is a good issue to bring up. I'm not sure we can figure it out. I think we did discuss it at the task force, but I think we couldn't figure it out. Remember, we're trying to, well, I am sure that Medicare will determine eligibility for folks, not us. Because it's a federal program and it's all federal dollars. So, and from an administrative point of view, one thing we did discuss at the task force is we don't want to disrupt the federal administration system and duplicate or gum that up, and they probably would feel just as strongly. This is not like Medicaid, where Medicaid's a state federal system and states can play a big role in terms of eligibility. I do think there's a good chance that Medicare will require that whatever option we pursue, if we pursued the Medicare Advantage plan option, they would say, okay, that's fine. And if the legislature wants to legislate that you'll be the only Medicare Advantage plan, okay. But we think people should still have the choice of traditional Medicare. So some people may choose. Well, I think we may have to figure out, are we going to be able to compete, if you will, with the traditional Medicare, and how will we do that? I think I did look into, can third parties pay Part B premiums? And they can, as long as they're not a provider. No providers can pay Medicare Part B premiums, but insurers can and do pay Part B premiums. So I'm just not certain, Charlie, what the administrative implications would be. I think at some point, for those folks who've signed up, are eligible for Medicare, and have paid at least the first time their Part B premium, we could take that over and pay it going forward. But I'm not quite sure how we could do that from the outset. And I certainly think we shouldn't count on we would pay all Medicare people's Part B premiums, because some people may not choose the Medicare Advantage route with us. Anyway, that's my comment.
So let me be more clear about this. So when
I can't hear you, Charlie, all of a sudden. You don't look like you're muted, but I can't hear you.
Oh, you can't hear?
Can
you hear me now?
Yes, now.
Okay. So it is going to be up to Medicare or CMS of who is Medicare eligible. That's for sure. It's also for sure that Medicare will not provide Part B benefits if that person has not had Part B premiums paid for, either by them or by Medicaid now, or as John says an insurer can do it, and the state could do it. But if the state just chooses not to do that, the state will not get Medicare Part B premiums or benefits for that person. And at this point, the Part B benefits, say 2022 numbers, are on the order of about $8,000 on average per Medicare beneficiary. And the premiums about $2,000 a year for most people. It's more for high income people. So it behooves the state to pay those premiums to get that Medicare Part B money. The Medicare Part A money can come on behalf of an individual from their work history. There's no premiums for that. For those who do not have not enough work history, they actually do have to pay premiums. That's a separate question in my mind, because the amount of money coming to the federal government for Part A is a little bit less than Part B, and the Medicare Part A premiums are larger, and it's a very small group of people for whom that's an issue. But for Part B, it's a large group of people for whom it is an issue. And if the state does not pay that premium, then again, and we're saying that everybody is eligible. So if you're a resident, you're eligible. And those who do not have a liability decide, I'm not going to pay it because I'm going to be covered anyway. Then the state's going to lose that money. There's no, I can't imagine that there's going to be any way to negotiate with CMS for that Part B money if that premium has not been paid. I just can't imagine that CMS would go along with that. So that's the essence of why I would say we need to pay it. That the state needs to pay it because it's financially to our advantage to get that. Now, if somebody chooses not to be part of the state plan, I don't quite know how we designate that and say, oh, you aren't choosing to be part of the plan, and therefore we shouldn't pay your Part B premium. You want to do something else. That's sort of an operations issue of how do you find that person and designate that person as somebody who's not covered, and do we want to do that? So anyway, I think that we need to pay it for fairness and simplicity reasons.
So is your proposal that the state pays all Medicare Part B premiums? Is that what it is?
Yes, yeah. And exactly how the state does that is something to be decided later. It could be that it just goes along with a refundable tax credit, or it could be some other way. It would have to be something that the state probably negotiates with CMS at the time of how is that going to occur, because right now it comes out of people's Social Security, and if it does, there could be a refundable tax credit for that, and that could remain, but it could also be some other way. But I don't think that's a decision that needs to be made of exactly how it's going to occur, just that it is money that needs to be rerouted, I guess, restructured, and a revenue that needs to be restructured into a tax to cover that, so the state can cover that. So that would be my proposal. Yes.
Morgan, did you have anything to add to this?
No, Charlie's raised the right issue, and I think Mimi had a question of like, well, legislatively, could you fix this by requiring the payment or something of that nature? But I mean, I would say that's also part of that conversation. But I think Charlie's conceptually correct about this thing, right? We don't, there isn't much incentive for folks to like make that payment, and if it does, it drives a bigger deficit on our sort of, accessing transferable dollars.
Okay, so just getting a sense of the committee, do you feel ready to vote on this, or do you want to mull it over? I just want to get a sense of whether you would want to vote either for or against this proposal right now, or do you want to have more time to think about it? Mary Lou?
I guess I'd like a little more time to think about it. It makes some sense. If everybody else wants to vote, I'll vote.
Yeah.
But, there are other issues around Medicare, and I won't go into them, but someone raised something last night that I asked John about, because John's been my kind of Medicare guy, and then looked it up on AI, et cetera. And there are issues that are going to arise around people at the various levels. We're talking here about that it's really the lower income folks that we're trying to protect and make sure that they become part of the plan. But people at the higher end, with Medigap and all kinds of things that are interesting that I really had, even though I'm on Medicare, I have Kaiser, and so it's very simple. But you know, it's complicated, and some issues were raised to me last night that I kind of went, oh, somebody who's been very strong in support of Universal Health Plan, but is on Medicare and high end, and they were questioning some things, and I'm going, I don't know the answer to some of this. So I think Medicare is complicated.
It is complicated, and I'm with you. I probably could use a little more time. John?
Yeah, you know, as I think about this, I think Charlie raises a good point. I mean, this really is a little bit like Medicaid match. The degree that Part B is paid for every $1 paid on Part B, $3 come to from the federal government into the state. And an approach in which essentially the single payer said, well, from the get-go, we'll pay it. And then we'll see what happens, depending on, you know, the terms of or the relationship we have with Medicare. I would imagine that taxpayers would expect that if it turns out somebody doesn't want to work with us, that we would no longer keep paying that, and they'd be on their own to sort things out. But I don't know. But it is interesting that it is kind of like a federal match, and certainly getting those kinds of match dollars has always been supported by the legislature and all. So that doesn't mean I personally probably would be happier to let this sit for a couple of weeks and vote on it then, but I'd be prepared to vote now and vote for it if that's the desire of the group.
Thanks, John. Mary Lou?
I think listening to John, you know, it is like the numbers Charlie quoted, if I wrote it down correctly, was that somehow that Medicare is paying like 8,000 per Medicare beneficiary, and the Medicare beneficiary is only paying in 2,000. So it's a net 6 to the good for whoever is the plan or whatever, and makes sense. And so, you know, it's kind of penny wise, pound foolish to maybe not do this. So anyway, but I'm either way.
Does anyone have strong feelings about voting today or in 2 weeks on this issue?
Let's do 2 weeks.
2 weeks. Okay. Let's move on to the next one, the HSR.
So the next item that I'm suggesting we change the recommendation on is the household size rate readjustment. You know, it was sort of controversial when we put it in, and I was a strong advocate for putting it in, but in thinking about it more, it provides another incentive to file separately. So it makes it more beneficial to file separately if it's there than if it's not there. And there's already an incentive with our tax structure to do that because we're basing on federal poverty level, which has a large exemption amount for one person, and then for the second, third, and fourth, it's a much smaller amount. And so that means there is an incentive to file separately from just that. But that's harder to deal with. The household size rate readjustment provides that incentive, additional financial incentive to file separately that I don't think we need. And it also complicates the tax structure in a way that we probably don't want. And so my suggestion at this point is we scrap it. And I think that frequent public commenter Lou Siniger would be happy if that we're scrapping it, because he's always said we should scrap it. So at this point, I'm saying, yeah, we should scrap it. So that's my suggestion.
So that's your formal proposal to scrap the household size rate readjustment.
Yeah, and what that does, it with our current tax structure, it makes it extraordinarily simple. There's just a 200% of federal poverty level exemption for the HCPIT, and that's it pretty much. And you can describe it in other even simpler ways, if you will. And I mean, there's also still the credit, the EPT credit, the Medicare Part B credit might not be there either because we're just going to pay that, and it won't even be a credit. So anyway, it makes it very simple.
Okay, Morgan, do you have any context?
Yeah, I was just going to ask Charlie maybe to just remind folks why we had it in the beginning with, and if we get rid of it, what are we going to do to rebalance on the revenue side?
Yeah, so the reason we had it in there is because when you look at when we did more detailed analysis of what is the effect of our taxes on households compared to the status quo, that the larger the household, the more they saved. So essentially, the plan as it is without the household size rate readjustment, would move more of the burden from large families to small families. And the household size rate readjustment changed that a little bit, but not very much. It still with it in there, it still means that compared to the current system, there's going to be a lot more burden on single people than there are on multi-people households. That is still going to be there even without the household size rate readjustment, but without it, that burden is going to be a little bit less. So it's or a little bit more on single filers and to some extent double filers, but it's really more the single filers have that have the burden shifted onto them more than others. But for even with it in there, dual filers or joint filers would have a financial incentive to file as two single filers, because then they could, even with its change, they would have that incentive because they could then lower their tax burden by having 200% of single persons FPL twice exempted from their taxes. So it does put a little bit more burden on the single filers than already is there, but that's going to exist even with it there. So yeah, it's a small change in that burden shifting that already exists.
Thanks, Charlie. Richard?
I'm in favor of removing the household size rate readjustment aspect. Charlie, at the same time, would you propose, you didn't say it, but I'm just bringing it up for consideration of also changing for the first filer, set their income threshold at 138 of federal poverty level, and the second and subsequent set it for 200% of federal poverty level.
Yeah, I would also urge that, but that's a separate question in my mind.
Okay.
Yeah.
Could you say the second, I mean, are you actually making two proposals? I just want to be clear on what the second.
Well, so the first part of the proposal is just get rid of the household size rate readjustment. I think we could maybe vote on that.
Yeah.
The second suggestion is, it's a separate suggestion, but for somewhat similar reasons, but not quite the same, that we should change the single filer exemption to only 138% of federal poverty level rather than 200% of federal poverty level. But I actually think that's a separate question that we should talk about separately.
Yeah.
Since that's new information for at least some of us, is that something that we could defer to the next meeting? The second proposal. Okay. So are you ready to make a motion on scrapping or?
Yeah, I move to scrap the household size rate readjustment.
Okay, so Charlie's made a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? Could
Oh, I
we,
should say that it also increases it means that the HCPIT rate has to go up to make up for the fact that we're not getting that money from the bigger households. So it does about 1%. It goes from about 10.1% to about 11.1%. The necessary rate if we do that.
should
And-
that be part of the motion then, the proposal?
Yeah, well, and I will also say that if we also include funding Medicare Part B, that's another 1% increase on HCPIT. So, but that's going to be a vote for the next time. So yes, I guess that we scrap the household size rate readjustment and increase the HCPIT suggested rate by 1% to make up for the loss of revenue that would occur by doing that.
Yeah, and I think just to add to that point what Charlie just raised here, like that money is technically already being collected as part of the HCPIT, right? So your one's effective rate is already baked into this, but we're simply saying instead of collecting this sort of per person payment, right? We're transferring that revenue into the rate itself.
Yeah.
Okay.
And again, as I said, what that means is that single filers are going to end up paying a little bit more than they would have otherwise with the household size rate readjustment, and the filers with more exemptions would end up paying a little bit less. So that's the net effect of it.
Okay, and Mary Lou, do you still second that motion?
No,
No, okay.
let somebody else second it.
Okay, would anyone else like to second that motion?
I'll second it.
I'll second it.
Okay, I think we heard Richard first, and then Jeff,
Okay.
do you have any other discussion?
Just, Mary Lou, go ahead.
Go ahead. Okay. I'm already having difficulty with the percentage for the personal income tax. And I am sitting here thinking, what am I doing in, kind of saying, oh, well, add $1 billion for this, add $1 billion for that. That just moves it up to 11. We're up to 12. I'm like, somehow it's got to be less than 10. I understand, and I've been here every step of the way, and I'm not trying to be all of a sudden like disruptive, like, oh, what have we done here? But it is, it gives me heartburn to kind of think about presenting this out there to the folks and having them, and yes, we can explain it, and I've helped build it. So I'm in a quandary because at this point, what is 10 or 11? I personally, for reasons, I'd rather have it increase the employer payroll tax. And, I understand the business about, that's really the employee and all of that, but somehow I can sell it better, I think, that way. So anyway, that's my only issue with this thing.
Totally understand. I just want to get Charlie or Morgan to respond
Yeah,
to
so this is a challenge, right? The sort of headline rate of the PIT, is optically right
Yes.
large, depending on who you want to talk to about that. But I think the other piece we've been trying to communicate here is through the series of what gets taxed as income, right? The phase in,
Yes.
as well as the credits. The vast majority of people will owe no liability. And then the effective rates of those that have some liability rises with income.
Yeah.
So I think this is the challenge of having kind of this sort of like headline rate relative to how it's deployed. But yes, again, it creates a communication challenge,
Yes.
right? Trying to explain sort of this to folks.
I get it. I get it.
Yeah.
Thank you for listening.
Okay, Jeff.
I'll defer to Charlie and John. I've gone first more often than not.
Yeah, I just want to bring up, we received, to me, a very soul-searching comment from a large group of people who have concerns about the direction we're going. I believe part of the problem is we have not communicated to a group of the public like that. We haven't had a session where we sit down and, okay, let's talk about what is progressivity. What is this household thing? What's going on here? And make sure people understand what we're doing. And to me, that comment causes me to really feel uncomfortable. We should get a sense from the public. Again, we don't have time before this is finished, but I would urge that the transitions committee do this as quickly as possible, because I think when you get a response from the public like that, you should take it seriously. The second thing I would just mention is, I don't know if everybody knows, but it looks like there's a bill that's moving along that may pass that would decrease the estate tax in Oregon. Oregon's one of a minority of states that has an estate tax. And in response to that, I think Kevin Mannix has a ballot measure that he's getting signatures that would end the estate tax. I mention it because clearly we're talking about the same population. And so, don't think that this population isn't going to have some opinions here. And again, I think we should at least be trying to figure out what the big picture is in terms of how far we can push. Today, I'm a little like Mary Lou. We're talking about, we could increase this by 1% or that by 1%. Whoa, we've got to take this more seriously, I think, than that.
Okay, Jeff.
First, thank you, Charlie, for ballparking what that percentage increase would be. And follow on to that, is it on the Medicare proposal that we'll be talking about in 2 weeks, is that also about a 1% increase?
Right.
Yes. Okay. Thank you. And this is just simply pointing out that Oregon is currently number 6 in terms of the highest personal income tax rate. California is number 1 at 13.3%. We will go from 9.9, let's call it 10 for discussion purposes, to 22. So, and to John's point, and consistent with the report that was done by the legislative office in Salem in 2022, there has been no dynamic modeling and what the impact will be. And people will move. It's not the only reason people move. People will move, which means we'll have less revenue than anticipated.
Okay, thanks, Jeff. Charlie?
Yeah, so I want to point out that one of the reasons the tax rate has to go up so much is because we're modeling 200% of federal poverty level is exempt, that there's a large part of the population that is not paying any taxes. And so pretty much all of this new burden, from going to 10% to 12% is going to be on high income earners. And so, we're especially, I guess, high income households of, or high incomes, no, I should say, especially on high income single filers, that there's going to be a increased burden on these things. So another piece that I would like to point out is the HCPIT portion is extraordinarily progressive. The EPT part is a little bit regressive. And so as we increase the EPT, we are making the tax more regressive, which it seems to be against what some of the people saying we should do that want. So it's sort of odd to me that they would be suggesting, and also like decreasing the EPT credit, that makes it more regressive. The more you read, and why does it make it more regressive? Because wages tend to be concentrated in the lower income population. And so if you put a higher tax on those wages through the EPT, you are affecting it's not lower income, it's middle income people more mostly. The higher income people are affected less by that. So I'll stop there, just sort of the progressivity, regressivity issue in the EPT. So
Thanks, Charlie. Chenwei?
I have a suggestion. One issue I have mentioned repeatedly in the board meeting is up till now, we haven't do a significant statewide outreach and communication with the general public. So we have no idea what would be acceptable range of the PIT from the average household. So one of the reasons we haven't done that is the legislature have an appropriate budget for the board to conduct those town hall meeting and communication and potentially other method of gauge what the Oregonians think acceptable. And that will be very dangerous for all of us because we don't want to spend 3 years and all the time, and in the end, it rejected by the voters because of the tax rate, that we are proposing something unacceptable by the majority. And so this will be an urgent issue that when this committee file our final report, I think it's important to put a note to emphasize the importance of the communication. And there are many communication challenges. On the one hand, we need to let the voters, the Oregonian, know what they are comparing with. And that is a complex and tough communication challenge because we need to be preempt from the massive attack and challenges once this is put in vote. And we need to inform and communicate with the voters, the Oregonians. At the same time, we also need to hear their voice. So I suggest when we have a final meeting, we want to file final report. And I will continue to bring this issue up in the board that we have a huge gap of understanding what Oregonians are thinking about this plan, including the tax and the benefit. Thank you.
Thanks, Chenwei. And I know we gave that feedback to the communications contractors too. So that's definitely a recommendation for them as they talk with different groups. Jeff?
Very high level comment about where the direction we are going is to have one of our primary revenue sources to be on the chosen few. In contrast to the healthcare, universal healthcare coverage that you get in Europe, it is broad-based, everybody, primarily through consumption or value-added taxes. We're going in a very different direction. And I think the reason it is able to work in Europe, even with their challenges that they have on financing and coverage, they've chosen broad-based taxation. We are not going down that road. And I offer that just as a big high-level picture of where the direction we're going.
Thanks, Jeff. Charlie?
So I want to agree with both what Jeff just said and also especially with what Chenwei said. I mean, I've been advocating for years that we need to have a broad discussion among with the public in settings where they are presented with enough information to be able to understand it. So sort of the kind of I forget what the term Chenwei used when he proposed this maybe a couple of years ago to the board of the kind of groups that need to get together to be talking about this tax structure. I don't think that there's going to be enough budget and time to do this within the governance board. To me, it's one of the recommendations that the governance board could think about to the legislature is, yeah, before this happens, you're going to have to go out to the public and get lots of feedback and about the tax structure, and you should finance a robust effort to do so. Otherwise, it's not going to happen. So that would be my suggestion, is something to think about is what should the board be recommending to the legislature? And maybe a little bit can be done by the board before that, but I don't think enough can be done. So I'll stop there.
Citizen jury is the word.
Yes.
Citizen jury, thank you. Yeah.
That's what we were calling it. Chenwei, do you have another comment?
Yes, just a brief comment regarding Charlie Swanson's. I raised this multiple times about Oregon's previous experience in 1988 to 1990 when we were developing the OHP. Remember, the initial prioritized list was purely based on cost utility analysis. And that when it was published, it received huge criticisms, and that prompted the committees that designed that prioritized list to went through at least 2 rounds. Each round took 1 year of town hall meeting in every county. And then they revised that at least twice based on that 2 years. They spent 2 years just to get the input. And that's something we need to learn. And also earlier, remember President Clinton's failed healthcare reform. It was very top down without receiving much input from the bottom. And we need to learn those lessons. And Oregon already did an example in the OHP.
Completely agree. So I'm sensing here that maybe we can't vote on the household size rate readjustment today, but tell me if I'm wrong. I mean, if you're ready to vote, that's okay. But otherwise, it might be another vote. We're going to have to defer if you need to talk to people about it. So, Charlie?
Well, I guess at first I thought we could, but maybe we can't based upon the fact that there's going to be a shifting of extra 1% tax. But I still think maybe we can vote on it, but I'll see what other people say.
I mean, you do
Does
have a
any-
motion and
oh.
a second. You do have a motion
you
and
have
a second.
motion,
Chair.
second. That's right. Yeah. So going back to discussion, does anyone have strong feelings about not voting on this proposal today? Chenwei?
If by changing or eliminating the household size will create an increase in the personal income tax, I suggest we postpone to the next meeting because we need more careful. This is a more complex issue than just household size, because this has a chain effect on the total revenue need to be raised. And related to what Jeff just mentioned about whether we want to consider more broad-based, because one of the benefit of a more broad-based taxation is not pitting one group against others. There's a potential. Again, one of the strategy as we progress, we want to be defensive, preempt any potential attack, criticism, and one of them will be divide the Oregonians that between those who have to pay high tax versus those who don't have to pay tax at all. And so this is something we need to carefully consider regarding whether and to what extent we may want to consider more broad-based.
Okay, thanks, Chenwei. Richard?
So in Oregon, Chenwei, in 2026, how does that translate? What is a more broad-based tax
my question.
translate to in Oregon in 2026?
Well, it's related to whether we want to use 200% FPL or 150% or other options.
Okay, so that's one. From what I know, I'm a big fan of value-added tax, but I think that's a complete rework of the system, and I don't think that's going to come about in Oregon, although I'm a proponent for it for the country. I all along have said we need to consider sales tax. It's been voted down 8 times before in Oregon, and it definitely makes it more aggressive. But I just think we need to make it more broad-based. I don't think that 12% tax rate for the high earners, and high earners, that's arguable whether you're a high earner. I think we're looking at Currently, high earners would be individuals over 100,000 and families over roughly 190,000. As Mary Lou has talked about earlier, a lot of people don't consider that quote high income unquote. So I think I'm in favor of more broad-based tax, but I realize that it also is politically unpopular and makes it more regressive. Thank you.
Thanks, Richard. Charlie?
So I guess at this point, since we have a motion and a second, if we're not going to vote on this, how do we go about choosing to not vote on it? Do we have to vote on it? And
I think you can take back the motion. I don't know if that's the accurate term, but you can pull it
Rescind.
back.
You can rescind your.
Rescind, that's the word.
I'll wait and hear some more discussion before I rescind it. So thank you.
Okay. John? You're on mute.
Sorry. Well, I hear Jeff's point, and it's a good one, but I would remind everybody that I don't think there are many countries that have as much financial inequity as this country does. Maybe we need to look at how does Monaco fund its healthcare system. They might be a comparable example. I mean, the inequity here is breathtaking, and it's getting worse. And I've certainly appreciated all along, that this isn't going to be a kumbaya discussion in Oregon about this tax approach. It is going to pit part of the population against another, and we need to be prepared for that. And because ultimately, this is only going to be resolved if our culture has a discussion and there are political changes that change this trend. And is healthcare the place to start? I don't know, but those are things that should be discussed, and I personally am all for them, and I'm ready for that.
Mary Lou?
I think that I agree with John, and that the inequity is terrible. And the fact that kind of look in this room, and many of us have white hair or have dyed it, if it isn't. And so I hear from my middle-aged children and their friends, and then definitely hear from the younger people who are activists, et cetera, that we boomers have taken much more than our share, and that the people who are at the higher end of the scale should be paying more, that it's just terribly unfair to younger people. And I think that when you get out to look at things like the vote and the percentages of people, et cetera, that the high earners will definitely make their statements loud and clear, and maybe manipulate the thing again. But on the other hand, I really think that the lower income, younger people are fed up with the way it's been, and they want change. And so, I mean, it's a communications thing. I think we need to feel that we have just really looked at it from all sides now and come up with what we think, is progressive, is equitable, and is moving us away from kind of how things have been. So anyway, I sit on the, kind of the horns of the bull here. Thank you.
Okay, Charlie, I think we're gonna have to wrap this up either with a vote or rescission of the vote, so I'll leave it up to you.
So I will put in one more thing before I decide to rescind. Yes. So Chunwei mentioned maybe lowering the exemption amount. I don't think that we can lower the HCPIT exemption amount below 138% of federal poverty level, and still be Medicaid. We could lower it to that, but and that would be a little bit more broad-based. And then we could have a lower rate between 138 and 200%, but that's a separate discussion for another day. At this point, I'll rescind because it does seem like people want to think about this a little bit more. I will also send in a analysis that I've done essentially according to the the ITEP analysis of progressivity of or regressivity of Oregon taxes that shows what would happen with the proposed EPT and HCPIT rates that we're currently proposing. And one of the things that will become clear is that it changes the Oregon tax structure from being a little bit regressive to being pretty progressive in all respects, except that there's a little bit more taken from the lowest quintile than their income share. And that's essentially because of the EPT, because the EPT, there are quite a few of those people at the low income level are employed, and even those who aren't, I mean, there's enough of them employed that the EPT is taking money from them. Even, I mean, the EPT is on the first dollar of wages, so that's why is regressive. So, and there's reasons for that are progressive, why we chose that, but it still makes it regressive overall. So then there's really no way to get around that if you have an EPT, I guess. Unless you have a wage threshold, which there's reasons for not doing that. And I'll stop there.
I rescind my second.
Okay, thanks, Richard. That's good. That's what I was going to ask. So we'll defer to next time on this proposal too. There weren't any other proposals to revise the revenue proposal, right? That was it? Those two things? Okay.
Those are the two things, yes.
Really quick, Chenwei?
Just a quick comment. That's something that in the near future we may want to consider. One of the issue related to giving the payroll tax as a credit to employee, and is politically we want to make those who currently receive private health insurance relatively financial neutral. And so we might consider whether we want to increase how much that credit the employer paid payroll tax for the health insurance to credit to the employee. And that will increase the progressivities, because as mid to lower income people tend to have most of their income from the payroll, and when their employer pay payroll tax for the universal health care, they're paying them on behalf of those employees. And so if we give either full or more of those payroll tax to the employee in lieu of their personal income tax, I think that potentially will significantly reduce the regressivities.
Now, I would agree, but we've had this discussion a lot, and we sort of made a compromise at 50%. And I think at this point, we're not going to change that, at least within this committee. We're not going to change it by next time. I mean, I argued for a lot more earlier on, but I didn't win that argument. So,
okay. If you have a quick comment, Jeff, go ahead. Otherwise, we need to move on.
Certainly. Charlie, the 1% move in the healthcare personal income tax increase approximately for the change in either the household size or the Medicare adjustment, approximately how many dollars is that?
about $1 billion.
About $1 billion, okay. This is for next meeting topics. We should go on the assumption of the IT cost of the IT project to put this in place. And I think a reasonable number to use based upon past Oregon history is $1 billion.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, our tax plan at this point has nothing about
IT.
transition costs, et cetera, all those things. And those are going to be extra costs. And that was the discussion we had earlier today that we didn't make progress on either. So
I brought that up for information because that means more revenue.
Yep.
Okay, thanks, Jeff. So we are not going to get to the basic revenue proposal, obviously, today. So we're going to defer that really significant discussion to the next meeting. where we hope to have a vote on the basic revenue proposal. We have lots of homework between now and then, and I do want to propose that we extend our next meeting to
Yes,
3
good.
hours. Is that what you're going to do?
Yes.
I think
Great
we have-
minds. Yeah.
We have so many things that we've deferred, and we have lots to wrap up. So I'll see if I've got everything. I've been trying to take notes, and I scribbled all over my paper. So let's see if I can get to it. So first, Echo Northwest is going to send out a draft of their report in Word, so that we can provide feedback through track changes on the content of the proposal. You can also provide feedback on the structure if you have anything to suggest. This will be due by the time that we meet next. Sooner the better. Secondly, Morgan is going to send out a Word document of the reserve and startup revenue strategy, which you can also provide feedback on through track changes. So that will be a second document that you provide feedback on. Let's see. Third, on the revised revenue target, we may vote. Well, I think we will vote on whether we agree with using the scale or rebalance approach. And any other comments that you have about revenue restructuring, on the revised revenue target, send those also to Morgan. Let's see. Number 4, we postponed the vote on whether the state should pay for all of the Medicare Part B premiums. We understand that to be a 1% increase as well, until the 17th. There may be new. Did you say, Charlie, that you were going to provide other information on this? I can't remember, to help us figure this out, or no?
I think I provided the information that I
Okay,
presented
yeah,
today
the-
already. So about the
spreadsheet.
Medicare Part B
Okay.
piece, the cost, et cetera. And I think I provided the information of I provided a spreadsheet. I actually didn't even check to see if it got shared. That does have essentially the 3 tax plans, the one that we've currently talking about, the one with a 1% increase because of the household size rate readjustment, and one with another 1% increase, so the 2% increase over the original one, that has both things in it, so that people can compare that. And I think it's just done for the 1 exemption and 2 exemption households.
Okay, so please review that information just so that we can
Yeah.
can vote. And then the last thing I have is that we're also deferring the vote on scrapping the household size rate readjustment with a 1% increase. For this, we'll all have to mull it over and look at the information provided. Are you going to send us additional information on this, Charlie, or no?
I guess I'm not quite sure what additional information is needed, but if somebody can come up with something that they have questions about, something that would help them, let me know, and I will try to see if I can do an analysis of it.
And what I would ask you to do, if you have questions for Charlie, please just send them to him individually, or maybe with staff and Morgan, and not send it to the whole committee, please. Okay, I think that was everything. And again, we're going to add the basic revenue proposal up for a vote. So please review it. You have the slides on the basic revenue proposal, so we're ready. So we've got lots of homework in the next 2 weeks. And so with that, I need to move it quickly over to public comment, because we have, I think, 2 people providing public comment. So.
Yes, we had a few
Nothing.
sign up. Yeah, we had a few signups today, but I think we'll just have one person based on who's present. So Lou, I will invite you back to share your public comment now. And as always, public comment is really appreciated. Written public comment can be submitted via our website at any time. And the cutoff for that is 72 hours before the meeting. And for spoken public comment, you can sign up 24 hours before the meeting. But with that, Lou, I will invite you to share.
Okay, hi. I really love this committee, this subcommittee. You guys have done really a big job. And I really appreciate how much you have accomplished, given that you are all volunteers, which gets me to my original gripe, was that the legislators did not give you enough money, nor did they offer to pay you. But the second thing I wanted to point out is I was shocked with Milliman's report. And it seems to me that if you take PEB plus, meaning Medicaid benefits, and give them to more people, that you will have an extreme cost, especially when nobody has really nailed down all the savings that a universal plan would give. I think somebody mentioned that look how much savings a doctor's office will have not having to process. Right now, there's 2 clerical people doing processing of insurance payments for every doctor. Just think of how much that will save, just that by itself. So, it's right. I mean, you're right. You're going to have to do surveys, focus groups, and stuff like that. That should be in the report. It should be in the report that you you get more money from the legislators for another bite of this apple and still get done by 2032. So thank you very much, folks. I'm really proud of what you have done. I wish we could do more. I'm really disappointed that it was shut off so early, but that's it. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment, Lou. All right, we've got lots of homework, committee, and so with that, we're adjourned for today. Thank you.